Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I think still are people coming in, but I think we'll start because we have to finish promptly by 1 o'clock. It's a real great pleasure to be here as we've had this incredible morning session. I don't know what you thought of it, but I mean, how great to have these world leaders on stage talking about subjects that are so important. So this session is about cities, and it's about innovation in cities. And I'd like to ask our panelists to come up. No, we're not going to have any speeches. We're going to have a conversation. I'd like you to join in on that conversation. And let me just invite Dr. Julius Muia to come up first. Where is he? He is the principal. Here you go. Why don't you go that end, sir? And he's the principal secretary in the National Treasury and the Ministry of Planning, which is particularly relevant for cities, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Amy Jadesimi, who we heard this morning give a brilliant statement of, she's CEO of LADOL, which is an industrial parks, and she's been a commissioner on the Global Business Commission for Sustainable Development. Frank Rijsberman, who is the CEO of the Global Green Growth Institute, which is growing and changing the world and heavily involved in these issues. Chen Hongbo is the COO of TusHoldings, which is an absolutely fascinating park in Beijing and growing rapidly. And finally, Dr. Solomon Kidane, Zegeye, who is the deputy mayor of Addis Ababa. So doesn't get any better than this, does it? Look, we all know that cities are obviously crucial, and they're growing. When I was born, there were 1 billion people living in cities. I don't know when I'll die, but probably there will be between 6 and 7 billion people. One lifetime to go from 1 billion to, say, 6.5 billion. Never in the history of the world have we had that kind of demographic change. And of course, obviously, there are good things, there are bad things. People go to cities because life is better, incomes are better, jobs are better, opportunities are better, but they also go to cities and find they're crowded and growing too big, and congestion and pollution, and now poverty has switched from being mainly a rural problem to increasingly a city problem. Whether we succeed in the fight for sustainability will depend overwhelmingly how we do in cities moving forward. And that's what I want to talk about. And cities, obviously, are the place where more innovation takes place. And that's really what I want to talk about. And we'll just sort of ask you sort of to engage sort of fairly informally. Maybe we start with you, Deputy Mayor Solomon. I mean, Addis Ababa growing very rapidly, lots of innovation there. How do you see this?
Well, yeah, urbanization in general in Africa is going really very fast. And when you see the demography, we have more than 60% of the population are between 15 and 35. And in general, we need to grow. Where we are, basically, our current carbon footprint is quite low. So the main challenge for us is how do we manage the development of the cities in a way we become green, that we don't follow the track record of developing nations where they've been really going in the tough period. And so that's basically what I could say in general, what we were looking to. So innovation in cities, basically, there is a lot of potential, in particular, when you have a good experience sharing program, like, for example, the partnership P4G was definitely immense. If you really see the content in it, we've learned in a way that cities cannot really partner, or the nations can really partner, yet you have to really adapt the experience in a way how we could really develop green. But here the partnership, it's not only between governments or cities, but also the partnership between companies, could be startup, scale-up companies that really give you a specific, adapt their solution immediately, other than really governments adapting their solution. So this is also where I could see that there could be a lot in the innovation of cities to really nurture green development.
That's great. That's great. I'd like to sort of unpack a little bit when we say hotbeds of innovation? It's a great buzzword. What sort of innovation are we talking about? Frank, how would you think through the issue of innovation, and what's the innovation we need?
Well, there are the big cities, you know, the mega cities, and they're connected through the C40, for instance. There are 70 of those right now, and they have indeed a lot of new initiatives going on. Impressive. We see the electric buses here. But I'm also impressed that in secondary cities, not the capital, but the other ones in the country, there's often much less capacity, much less innovation, and a lot more need, if you like, for the basic services, to have decent transportation, to have sanitation, and so on. There is innovation there. We've run a business plan competition for young people, young greenpreneurs, and we got 350 applications. We're down to 10 finalists, and now we'll soon have 3 winners, with exciting initiatives from, in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, a group of people who want to have an architectural firm to green the city landscape and deal with flood management. Or in Morocco, a group of young people that are setting up a company to turn plastic waste into ecological paving stones. So that kind of, if you like, a little bit more basic innovation, not dealing necessarily with smart cities and with high-level bandwidth, but dealing with basic infrastructure and basic public services for the poor is critical. And I'm interested also very much in the link to industrial parks. I think industrial parks in many countries, this has been a key policy tool of governments to promote growth, and therefore we have all these groups of companies that are sort of concentrated in industrial parks. I see them as hotbeds for innovation as well. I see them as real opportunities to put solar on these nice flat rooftops, become zero net emitters, become zero waste. So I think both those types of innovation are really promising.
Yeah. This is a really important point that, you know, we tend to think of innovation as just about the high-tech end, and it is about the high-tech end. I mean, it's incredible, the opportunities using big data and GIS and things that are going on in transportation and cities and so on. We, by the way, I should have introduced myself. My name's Andrew Steer. I'm the president and CEO of the World Resource Institute. Cities is our biggest program, too. We have like 300 people around the world working in cities, and it's incredible what this big data can do. But in addition to that, what we're finding, and I think what you were making that point, is that actually many of the innovations that add the most value are actually pretty straightforward, and they're to do with management systems and so on. Let's go to Amy, to you. You've in Lagos, which is a very big city, a difficult city. What's the kind of innovation that you're seeing?
Thank you. So LADOL is a sustainable industrial free zone. So we believe obviously in the power of industrial parks. But if you look across Lagos, which I think now is the most populous city in the whole of Africa, we're seeing innovation coming both from the state government and from the private sector. So from the state government, they're breaking down these kind of federal monopolies around power, around the provision of water, and hopefully soon around waste. At the same time, that's enabling private sector to play a bigger role. For industrial free zones such as LADOL, we have a very specific niche market where we look at high-value industrial, and we're able to create completely new paradigms because Nigeria is just industrializing. So we have this huge market that needs innovation, that needs industrialization, but we're having this demographic dividend at a time where there is pretty much global consensus on the type of development that needs to take place. So we have the advantage of knowing that if we build sustainably, if we industrialize sustainably, we will be more profitable and we will create prosperity from our increasing population. The final point I'll make on innovation, and I think industrial free zones or free zones in general are really good for this, is that the innovation also needs to be local. So when you're looking at low-income, high-growth countries like Nigeria, our dream at LADOL is that people will come and innovate on the ground for the local market. So you have people engineering new solutions for one of the largest markets in the world in the market itself. We think that's really critical.
That's great. And by the way, LADOL stands for Lagos Offshore.
Deep offshore logistics space.
Yeah. That sounds complicated. What do you actually do?
LADOL. Okay, so LADOL, we actually started developing in 2001. So that's 17 years ago, and we started building 2004. We have a very unique free zone. So we have, on the one hand, the largest shipyard in West Africa. We also have what is growing to be the largest deep offshore support base. And that sounds very oil and gas-like, which is not something you like to bring up in sustainability conferences. But we're big proponents of the fact that in commodity-dependent countries like Nigeria, you actually have to leverage the oil and gas industry to support diversification. So we're using the income and the investment, and in some ways our partnerships with the oil and gas companies to now support a range of non-oil and gas businesses. And I'll give a shout out to Niras that just developed our new master plan, and a company called Systemic, where we've now identified a number of different sectors that can operate in the zone and create a circular economy. So everything from bamboo to developing human capital with Andela to different types of textile manufacturing and green manufacturing. But it's not possible to make the hundreds of millions of dollars of investment we need to make if you don't leverage off the biggest industry. But having leveraged off that industry, we can now create a completely new type of industrial development.
Terrific. Thank you. Let's see. Talking of high tech, Herbert, you run a park. It's a very remarkable one. Came out of a university, but like sort of almost Stanford University leading to Silicon Valley, Tsinghua University leading to the TUS Park. Could you tell us about the innovation that you're trying to promote, and just tell us a little bit about the park too?
Thank you very much. Yes, it's very happy to have this chance to share some information from China and Beijing. So where I come from is a company named TusHoldings. And this company is creating an ecosystem in China to helping the small startup companies grow up. How can we do this job? First one, we make the infrastructure. We're constructing the science park. The biggest one is 770,000 square meters in front door of Tsinghua University. I think maybe the world's largest university science park. And then not only one park, we set up the incubator network. We have 120 incubators all over China. Not only in China, we also set up the incubator in United States, Canada, Australia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, and Egypt, and Italy, and also UK. Oh. So we are a bigger network for innovation. The main target is helping the companies. You may ask why it's so important to helping the company. Because in China, we have well-known name as World Factory, made in China, right? Now the China getting the time transfer from made in China to create in China. We should have to make something and create something by ourselves. So we think the high technology company is the driving force for the technology transfer from the desk of the professor to the real market. That is why the Chinese government put a lot of resources for helping the small startup company, high technology company. And the main tool for helping them is the incubator and the science park. So this is a brief introduction. I can talk about half hour about that.
Well,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so city is a very important topic. I think you can't stop people move from remote area to city. In China, we have a strict regulation. If you have, we name it Hukou, how can I say it, Hukou? You're born from remote area, you have no right to stay in Beijing, right? You want to go to Beijing, this capital city, you lose some your right, but you can stay, can work, but you're not enjoy the same benefit for the people who originate in Beijing. So, but people find every channel to go to the big city. Then, as just you said, we have people want to have a better life to go to the city, but when they go to the city, they have a serious challenge. Traffic, high price. You know how much per square meters the house in Beijing? It's about $60,000 US per square meter. This is so they are facing big challenge. Then what do? We have two directions to go. For the Chinese government to say, no, we need another city. Peking is too big. So we selected one city named Xiong'an. It's about 200 kilometers south of Beijing. Now becomes the national next 100 years strategy to set up the new city. And how about old city? We need innovation. Right? We need to have the better life for the old city if they have the big challenge. So how can we improve the old city? We need innovation. So I have to be brave, I know. The first way is the government. In China, government is very powerful, so they issue so many regulations for better life in the city, water, land, and air. Secondly, I think you need a new technology. You need the new technology to improve the life in the city. And the third one is you need a fund, the money. So we have a lot of environmental and green funds setting up in China. And finally, I think sometimes you need to give people some hope by exactly samples. So they will design a small region for the green region, or even one single building is zero emission or something like that. So this is the way for Chinese government to solving the problem we are facing by the innovation.
Wow, thank you. Incredible long-term strategy. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see, Dr. Julius, you're a senior central government figure in finance and planning.
Yes.
And I'm so happy you're on this panel because normally panels on cities have people from cities, which is obviously right.
I live in a city.
Well, you live in a city. But here's the thing. We've been doing a lot of work on this under the New Climate Economy project. It turns out that only 25% of all the countries in the world have a national level strategy towards cities. And clearly that's something you're working on. I'd love to hear how the central government is thinking about sort of how you bring the inspiration of cities to life so it'll drive the development of the whole country.
Well, thank you. One of the things that we do recognize in Kenya in our long-term development framework is that going forward, we are going to have more people in Kenya living in cities. At the moment, about a third of Kenyans live in rural areas, and the other, no, the other way around. A third live in the cities, and 2/3 live in rural areas. But we think by 2030, that equation will reverse. And therefore, the first thing as a government is to predict and plan that we are going to have more people living in cities. Now, having realized that, then what we've done as a government is to look for a way in which the development of the cities is going to be orderly. And what we have done in that framework is to come up with a spatial plan, a national spatial plan, which shows what kind of structures the national space would be devoted to, what you can do where. And then having created that sort of order, and that we did in 2017, is also to look at the urban areas. How do you develop the urban areas in a structured way? And we have a national urban development plan. And so there is something intentional in government in realizing that urbanization is real, it's going to be there, and we've got to plan for it. But I want also to say there's also another angle to it and ask ourselves then, what kind of cities are we going to have? And I think that's the next conversation. And listening to what is going on about climate change, going on about greening, that is the next tipping point for us, because in our 2018-2022 development planning framework, we have identified climate change, and for that matter, the need to green the economy as a cross-cutting thematic theme for our country. And therefore, what this is calling on us is to look for very clever frameworks, and that is why we are very excited coming for this event, so that we can pick clever ideas, so that we can put them in our planning frameworks for our country in terms of how then to have cities that are not just organic, cities that are intentional, cities that are planned. And if I can close that by saying, is cities where you maximize the resources that are there in terms of using the resources, but also you minimize the waste and pollution. So if you think about it from a mathematical point of view, it is a maximization function where you maximize use of resources subject to the constraint of wastage and pollution.
So now we know why you have your doctorate, because that's how you think about things. You're dead right. We all should think of things like that. Now, the whole point of P4G is it's partnering for the global goals and green growth. And none of the problems that we're struggling to address can be solved on our own. I hope you notice the brilliant composition of the panel. You know, we have a mayor of a city, we have a senior leader from the federal government, we have a truly sort of private sector entrepreneur. We have Herbert's a very interesting mixture. He's a private entrepreneur but brings the academic community. And then, of course, we have 3GI, which is an international organization designed to help. So I'd like us to sort of turn to that discussion. So I want you to think of a partnership that has excited you, bringing innovation, if you like, or an innovation that you feel we need to be working on that needs a partnership. So just jump in the conversation at any stage. But Solomon, I mean, maybe turn to you first, because you actually have to wake up every Monday morning and you look, and over the weekend, the city's grown even more. There's probably more traffic. There's probably more pollution. I mean, you have a big and difficult job. And you have to prioritize where you're going to put your own efforts and staff time. What are the issues that you're struggling with the most? What are the problems, and how could sort of better teamwork and partnerships help you?
Well, definitely, the challenge in Addis is so immense, as you've stated very well. The traffic jam, in general, the emission is quite high. Mainly, of course, also the greenhouse gas basically is from the transport sector, while the rest, our industrialization rate is quite low. And as I've said it earlier, so we're just developing many industrial parks, special industrial zones, in a way, how we can promote the economy. So it's just, for us, we don't, the basics are very important, all the utilities, all the waste management, in a way, how we can bring an efficient basic system of the municipality for the public. Yet, the development practice that so often we follow is so scary that sometime in the future we will have the challenges that I mentioned earlier. And this, I think, partnership will be very much useful in a way to partner basically with, let's say, the big market countries, to have policy instruments that intertwine both developing and the developing nations somehow, because it is all what we do is a market-oriented development in a way to promote our export industry and then improve the economy, create job opportunities. Yet, it's only the policy instruments in many countries basically look into specifically to the product quality, not to the process behind the product. So having partnership, I would say I'm just a bit elevating the discussion somehow with countries of big markets look into also in a way how the products have been produced. This could have somehow created a level ground worldwide, I could rather say, at least in the developed world. Whatever we produce, whatever industrial parks we develop, we focus, we make sure that it's not being only sustainable, it's not being only green or resource efficient in the nations, in the seeds being produced, but also that somehow pushes, you get, a push factor from the developed countries or the global market to make sure that the process you follow to attain the product is also pro-green. So this is an area. Another one, I would rather say, especially for us, what's really limiting us to have a partnership in sharing data. So there is all this limited data where entrepreneurs, younger, and so the scale-up companies do not have full access of it. So their innovation becomes so limited, though they are within a city, but the access is not full-fledged enough, not only in terms of the process of the design and development, but also in terms of understanding what the market or what the world requires. So if such kind of partnership could have been created, so this could also really open up a new space where innovators could have a good role.
Fascinating. That's really interesting on the sort of the big data. Anybody else? Frank?
Happily, yes. I mean, you didn't announce us as such, but we are a partnership, right? So we
Yes.
are a club of countries, about 30 countries, who are joined together by their belief that they should transition their economy to a green, more sustainable, more inclusive model of growth. And indeed, 4 of the world leaders that you had on stage this morning are members.
Yeah.
Korea, Denmark, Vietnam, Ethiopia. And the 5th, my own country, is still a work in progress, but we're counting they will join. And we have another 30 countries that are in our queue that are joining as well. And these countries indeed share experience. They share experience in green cities. You know, we support quite a few of the countries in coming up with these plans that the Permanent Secretary engaged in. Say, we have a capital, we want 6 new secondary cities to move the growth into in Rwanda. We help with master planning. Then we help in Amman, Jordan, James Kang sitting there, on the electric buses. So we're very excited with the P4G partnerships. The electric bus partnership that we've seen here is a great opportunity for us to hook into our countries, into those bus manufacturers that will come up with soot-free buses. And indeed, there is the Clean Energy Accelerator that we collaborate with on industrial parks in Vietnam to come up with a financing model, a leasing model, that will make it totally obvious for, frankly, all industrial parks that their companies should band together in putting solar on rooftops. They have such wonderful, large, flat roofs and so on. So there are a number of those partnerships that are launched here at P4G that make perfect sense for us to engage with and in a way expand the partnership that we are among our countries. So yeah, we are very excited about everything that's going on here.
That's terrific. Thank you, Frank. Amy, and then Julius.
So we're strong believers in the AU, the African Union, and turning into more of an EU. As a company, Ladol is working through P4G and with Systemic in Kenya and Ethiopia on creating new industrial parks, and also looking at the policy framework around that, whether it's public or private. And in different countries, the solution in Ethiopia is certainly going to be different to the solution that we're deploying in Nigeria, but the themes are going to be the same. It's going to have a clear sustainability target, and it's going to be very actionable and practical. I think it's also important to create equitable partnerships. I touched on it this morning, but the other key thing about Ladol and what we want to promote in Kenya and Ethiopia is that on the indigenous side, we have to add value. On the international side, there has to be respect and equitability so that you can create unique solutions on the ground. So I think overall, the Africans have more of an obligation, if you like, more of an opportunity at the same time to create partnerships amongst ourselves to really build a fundamental base on which these international partnerships can then come in.
Thank you. Julius.
Yeah. If you look at the concept of partnership, and I'm happy you have asked us to comment on this, from a conceptual point of view, it allows us to do things that on your own you can't do. And therefore, because then we are faced with limited resources, limited capabilities, to the extent that you can partner with somebody where you can leverage on the strength of either that person, that business, that country, then in a collective way, then we achieve more as a people. So in Kenya, what we did in 2007, when we were looking at our development framework, we said we want to be an upper middle income economy by 2030, and we also want our people to be living in a clean and secure environment. And that is what drives our green economy, and also our drive for making sure that we don't have a lot of waste. But then that meant that the resources that we are going to generate from Kenya through the exchequer are not enough. So we estimate that over 70% of the financing of that development framework must come from outside the local resources. And therefore, ingrained in that is the architecture of a partnership in terms of funding, in terms of development, in terms of operations, in terms of managing the economy. And so we have got a public-private partnership law, which was enacted in 2012 with the rules and regulations. And that one now defines how the public sector engages with private sector, non-government actors, and so on and so forth. And then tied to that, and at a micro level, I want to recognize that using that public-private partnership architecture, we have got a north-south collaboration between Denmark and Kenya, where an industrial park next to Nairobi is receiving a lot of support from Denmark in terms of how to actualize a cluster which is green and which is a circular manufacturing cluster. And Jacob is here with us. Jacob, you can raise your hand. Jacob is the one who is assisting us in that. So it's just recognizing the power of working together with other institutions, other countries, other governments who know it better so that we can bake a bigger cake.
Great, great. Thank you very much. Herbert, anything from you on this?
Yes, I have some point to want to share. I think that no one can solve the problem by themselves, and the cooperation is the key word for facing all the challenges. From my point of view, the collaboration have three functions. The first function, they can generate the new technology. The cooperation between government, university, research institute, industry, media, and the financial sectors. Those are the stakeholders. If they can collaborate together, then the company will have a good ecosystem. And when the company have a good ecosystem, then company can transfer the technology from the professor's desk to the market. So I think that cooperation is very good. How can we create a platform that those stakeholders working together? Well, there may be many other ways, but I think from the experience of China, the industrial park, science park, and the incubator is one of the important platforms to let the government, university, industry to work together. Because we are the people to creating this platform. We are the people to make the phone call to government and to university, to research, and to the financial part, to invite them to come to the science park to talk with the high technology companies. So the collaboration between those sectors creating a new technology. The collaboration in the second function is the making the cooperation between different industries happens. You see, the city facing the problem cannot be solved by one industrial sectors. We need air pollution, we have water problem, we have land problem, we have transportation, we have many things have to be need so many business sectors to working together. How can we let them working together? They can knock the door, each of them to knock the door to the mayor, say, hey, I have this tool. And the other people goes to say, hey, I have another tool, I can solve the problem. But before they knock the door, they need some people to say, hey, come here to make a package. What facing your problem you're facing, I already set up the package for the air, for the land, for the water, for the transportations. And then I will knock the door to you. Say, I have the solution for you, for the whole package of the solution. So who is I? Who is I? This is also the science park. I think because we have 6,000 companies in our network, so we can easily pick up what you need. And then let them working together. And then we knock the door to the cities. So that is the second function. I think the third function, the collaboration, the collaboration have three functions. The third function is making the global solutions. Because the environment problem is not regional, it's global. So how can we work together? That is the country-to-countries cooperation. How can we make the country have different GDP levels to work together to facing this? I think that's the key things is that people meet each other, understand the situation. So some people thinking China now becomes the world's second economy, will be a world leader very soon. Please go to China and stay there for half a year. I will bring around. And you will say that is the next 100 years target. It's not next 5 years, absolutely not. So people have to understand each other by actually meet, shaking their hand, not only the newspapers, magazines, from TVs. That is a 2D image. You need a 3D image. And come to call me and bring
All right. Okay. So we'll flash your telephone number on the screen in just a minute. But I think there's some deals to be done along this end of the table, actually. Unfortunately,
Oh,
we started late
Great.
because the morning was a little delayed. We could take a couple of questions or comments if anybody wants to. Sir.
Hello, my name is I'm doing climate communication here in Denmark. I can't help wondering, we all can see positive things in partnerships, but isn't there any risks? You're all talking about positive things, and that's good, but isn't there any risk in doing partnerships? I mean, you have ideas, but someone is coming to decide something for you or whatever.
Great question. Take one more.
Yes, my name is Jadesimi from Ethiopia. And talking about this partnership, what I've noticed is actually there are things that can be prioritized. For example, if you think of Addis, having a GIS data, it's a simple thing that other countries pass through. You know, transferring this kind of GIS planning could be easy to start. So making cities to have a capacity, like poor countries sharing knowledge, it doesn't necessarily cost millions. It's just knowledge sharing. It's data sharing. So why is it so difficult, like, to put all partnership in a nutshell, but really specifically to see what can we share in the short term, what can we share in the medium term, in the long term. So there are things which I see in Europe, there are things which can be easily transferable, easily used, for example, energy transfer, energy markets. These are already established in Europe.
We should just get on with it. That's really helpful. These two questions are a brilliant way to end, actually. You know, we tend to say, partnerships are wonderful, we need them, and well, that's true. But we've all been part of partnerships that, you know, actually aren't adding a lot, that they take a lot of time, a lot of transactions costs, and they can lead to less successful outcomes. And I think what you're saying, sir, is there's some things that we just, I mean, if we just would share more, we can call it a partnership if you like, but why don't we just get it up? Here's the question, each of you less than 30 seconds. What is the hallmark of a good partnership as opposed to a bad partnership? Starting with you, Julius.
I think a good partnership is where the parties start to benefit, where there is a mutual relationship, there's mutual gain, where it's a win-win-win.
Great.
If we can get that, we'll be there.
Okay.
Thank you.
And if you just agree with him, you just say agree and we'll move on. Yeah. Amy.
Yeah, I would say you have to align incentives between the partners. I think you also, therefore, have to have a very clear and detailed master plan or design for where your partnership is going to start, where it's going to end. The last thing I'd say in terms of sharing, definitely historically it's been difficult to get technology transfer going. I would say that what we need to do as Africans is create better platforms into which technology can flow. So we need human capital, we need infrastructure, we need facilities through which we can capture the technology.
Terrific. Thank you. Frank.
Well, I agree that partnerships are hard work, and I agree with my previous speakers, but we have to ask what the alternative is. Of course, we can be more transactional and just procure services and so on, but nothing really sticks then at the end, right? So while it is hard work to build partnerships, I'm still convinced that in the end, that the ROI, if you like, is positive if you do it deliberately. So it's, yes, they're not guaranteed to win, some will fail, but it's definitely still worth investing in partnerships for longer-term benefits that can be multiples of the sort of short-term transactional relationships.
Thank you very much. Herbert.
Yes, you have to remember in this world, we have more good people than the bad people, you know. So,
Just.
but sometimes a small group of bad people, when they start a partnership, the purpose is not that pure. You know, so they want to get money. That is the main target. They don't care what will happen later. So if you choose this partner, then the result will be risk. You know, when the something goes, they will just care about what they got. They don't care what you lose or not. So select a good partner, always the key for the successful cooperation.
Terrific. Thank
Well,
you.
for me,
Solomon.
for me, what could the risk be? Well, basically, we are in a boat, which is basically in a strong storm. So, of course, the level of maybe contribution could be so different, but we have to survive somehow all together. So, I think I really see a positive outcome of it, and it's a partnership that will not really leave us out of space, where individual countries can also have the roles that they can play. So in the partnership, I really see more of its benefit than the risks that could maybe outweigh. And that really, to add what he really said, what they're really saying, I don't know who has said it, but you know, all the problems that we see in the world, it's not because we have bad people that are strong, but it is because we have many quite intelligent people, but that are quiet. So we got to really work together and make sure that the partnership really works. This is my take on it.
That's a wonderful ending. I agree with all these guys. And I love that quote this morning. Was it the Dutch Prime Minister or was it Bolger Brendy that said, the biggest threat to the future of the planet is believing someone else will solve the problem. So Julius, Amy, Frank, Herbert, Solomon, thank you. What a great panel, eh? Let's give them a round of applause. And we finished with 1 minute to spare. Thank you all for coming.